It began in February on the streets of Miami, Florida. The Toyota Atlantic Championship, with competitors full of promise and high expectations. They have crisscrossed North America on a 14-race odyssey, all seeking the same goal, the prestigious Drivers' Championship. There have been moments of triumph and moments of despair. Now they come to the final race weekend of the season, with the championship still undecided. Whose name will join the list of champions in this illustrious series? We'll find out today as ESPN presents the final rounds of the Toyota Atlantic Championship. About 100 miles south of San Francisco, California, lies one of America's most prestigious addresses, the Monterey Peninsula, home of the Lonesome Cypress, Pebble Beach, and also the home of one of America's greatest racetracks, Laguna Seca, site of the 14th and dramatic final round of the 1992 Toyota Atlantic Championship. Hello again, everyone. I'm Bob Varsha. Welcome to Laguna Seca, where traditionally the Toyota Atlantic Championship winds up the season with a bash, a doubleheader. Coming into this weekend, no fewer than 5 different drivers had at least a mathematical shot at the 1992 championship. But after Saturday's first round, only 3 were left standing. The first shot was fired in qualifying by Charles Nearberg, 5th in points coming in, who offered up a clutch performance by sweeping pole position for both Saturday and Sunday's races and the bonus points that go with them. Behind Nearberg, the other 4 contenders, Steve Cameron, Chris Smith, Stuart Crow, and Russell Spence, filled rows 3 and 4. In the early laps, Nearberg, the first Atlantic driver to break the magic 100-mile-per-hour barrier around Laguna Seca, slowly pulled away from everyone except the white number 1 of 1990 Toyota Atlantic champion Mark Dismore. On lap 6, Spence, number 4 in the points and winner of 2 of the season's first 3 races, saw his title hopes evaporate due to mechanical problems. Then on lap 17, Nearberg's dream run ended when a $1 throttle linkage broke, leaving the Texas oil man to idle around and ponder the title that got away and elevating Dismore into the lead. At about the same moment, championship runner-up Steve Cameron was balked by a slower car, allowing the bright yellow 07 machine of points leader Chris Smith to pull alongside and pass for 4th place. A lap later, at the same point on the track, Stuart Crow swept by Cameron to tighten his grip on 3rd spot in the points. At the finish, Dismore claimed his 2nd win in 3 starts in 1992, followed by Canadian David Empringham and John Marconi, then the 3 remaining title contenders, Smith, Crow, and Cameron. On the points table, Smith leads Cameron coming in to Sunday's finale by 7 points and Crow by 12, with a maximum of 20 points available for victory. And so after 13 races, it all comes down to this. 1 race, 28 laps, 3 contenders, and the title at stake. With me to call the action, former Toyota Atlantic National Champion Calvin Fish. Calvin, on the basis of what we saw yesterday, I think we have to favor Chris Smith.
Well, going into today's race, Chris Smith really controls his own destiny. He understands that a top 3 finish will clinch the championship for him. For Cameron and Crow, they need to score a victory to maximize their point score from today's event. But there are some spoilers in there also. On the front row, we have Charles Nearberg and Russell Spence, and further back in the pack, we have David Empringham and Mark Dismore. Any of those guys are capable of scoring a victory today and having a dramatic effect on the championship itself.
It should be a great race. Now let's find out what the top men in points think of the battle to come. Standing by on the starting grid is Ralph Shaheen.
Bob, 3 drivers stand a chance at collecting this Toyota Atlantic Championship, but these 2, Chris Smith and Steve Cameron, stand the best of the odds. Now, Chris, you're going to start 3rd. We've had some races out here today. How's your strategy going into this event?
Well, our car is running great, and I feel really good. I just want to keep my nose clean and do what I have to do and win this championship.
Now, Steve Cameron, you're going to start back in 6th place. You're going to have to work a little bit just to catch him. Does that put an added amount of pressure on you?
Well, not really. I think the pressure right now is on Chris. He has the lead. He's starting amongst a pretty aggressive lot of drivers, so I think he's going to have a little bit of trouble keeping his nose clean, as he says. So I think I'll just watch a little bit for the first couple of laps, and then as the race progresses, we'll see how it develops, and we'll try and get by him.
Bob, it's time to take the gloves off. They've got 1 round left, and one of these 2, or maybe Stuart Crow, will be the new Toyota Atlantic champion.
All right, thank you, Ralph. Calvin, I think if we were asked to predict what we're likely to see among our 3 title contenders today, could we learn anything from yesterday's race?
I think so. Certainly Smith and Crow looked very evenly matched throughout the race yesterday. Cameron led them both but was overhauled midway, and the team will have worked very hard overnight to try and find the edge which will put him in front of those 2 guys in today's event.
Well, to learn more about how they plan to attack, let's get back down to the grid and Ralph Shaheen.
The dark horse in this championship chase, Bob, is Stuart Crow, is getting strapped in right now. Stuart, you are the dark horse, but you're right behind Chris Smith on the grid. How much pressure is on you to win this, and do you have a trick up your sleeve?
Well, you know, of course we'd like to win the race. No, I don't have any tricks. We're just going to do it best we can, see if we can win it.
He's been one of the most aggressive drivers all year long, Bob, and you know what? He also wore his lucky tie today.
I believe that, Ralph. With the title at stake, Stuart Crow will start on row 4 with fellow title contenders Cameron and Smith just in front of him. ESPN coverage of the Toyota Atlantic Championship from Laguna Seca, California is brought to you by Toyota Motorsports, where technology on a fast track is built into every Toyota. By Toyo Tires. No matter what you drive, we've got you covered from H to Z. And by Budweiser, the king of beers. With that clean, crisp, cold taste, nothing beats a Bud. Welcome back to Laguna Seca Raceway. Bob Varsha, Calvin Fish, and Ralph Shaheen with you for the final round of the Toyota Atlantic Championship in 1992. Here's a look at our weather conditions as we approach the green light. Low 70s temperature. They get 183 days of fog here on the Monterey Peninsula, but in 35 years of racing, I don't think there's ever been a bad day to go out and compete here at Laguna Seca. How about a look at the course now, Calvin?
Laguna Seca is 2.2 miles in length with 11 very challenging turns. Lots of elevation change, particularly through the famous corkscrew turn. Overtaking is usually made down into turn 2 and also into the final turn, a tight first gear corner before the front straightaway.
And the front straightaway is where our field will line up. It is a big field. Right now, let's take a look at the starting lineup for this final round of the Toyota Atlantic Championship. Coming into this weekend, Charles Neerberg from Dallas, Texas, had never scored a professional pole. He has 2 in the same weekend in his Ralt RT40 with a record lap averaging 100.57 miles an hour. Next to him, Russell Spence, the other man who dropped out of title contention this weekend, the rookie from Bradford, England, in a Reynard. On row 2, the points leader, Chris Smith from Palos Verdes Estates, California, in a Swift DB4. Next to him, number 3 in points, just 12 away from Smith, Stuart Crow from Dallas, Texas, in a Ralt RT40. On row 3, David Empringham in a Swift, runner-up in this year's Players Limited Challenge for Canadian Atlantic drivers. Next to him, Steve Cameron from Sonoma, California, the former crew chief, number 2 in points, just 7 away from Smith. The first 3 rows all under the old lap record here at Laguna. On row 4, John Marconi, who drove very well in Saturday's race here at Laguna. Next to him, Harold Heisman from Oslo, Norway, winner on the oval at Nazareth, Pennsylvania this year. Looking back now further in the field, on row 5, Mark Dismore from Greenfield, Indiana, the winner of yesterday's first round of this doubleheader weekend. On rows 7 and 8, note Jamie Gallis, son of IndyCar owner Rick Gallis from Albuquerque, New Mexico, who had a solid shot at the title this year. Back on row 10, Carlos Bonetti, 3rd in rookie points, but the front runner for Rookie of the Year. We'll explain that a little bit later. Further back on row 11, Jordan Harris from Malibu, California, loaned an engine to Russell Spence, who blew one in yesterday's race. Now, as you take a look back through the rest of the grid, note the number of cars, well over 30. We were barely able to get them all onto the start-finish line for today's race, and that is all important in the Toyota Atlantic Championship because we use a standing start. As the cars continue to circulate on their final formation lap, there is Steve Cameron, number 38, lighting up his right front. That's not the way you want to warm up the tires to operating temperatures here.
Well, typically you kind of ride the brake pedal a little bit to try and generate some temperature in the brake pads themselves, but obviously with that slight difference in camber change there turning into the corner, he actually locked the right front brake up. I doubt if it put a flat spot at this stage of the game.
We have 2 in-car cameras in this race. You just saw Steve Cameron's. There goes Peter Fawcetta Jr. from the racing mecca, New York City. And he, too, will be carrying it on board today. This is down the 160-foot plunge of the corkscrew. And a short straightaway through turn number 10. And then the short run up to 11. Now, this is the only place in North America, other than the Formula One Grand Prix in Montreal, Canada, where these cars also raced, that you will see a standing start. The cars will come to a stop on the grid When a green flag waves from the back, they will come under starter's orders. The lights will be revealed. They will flash red. Then they will either flash green or the red will go out. In either case, we have a start. Now we have a car pitting.
It looks like Joe Sposato. They've come in for a small change there. Going into the nose box, maybe he has a brake problem.
He will therefore start from the pit lane, and just as in Formula One, he must wait till the field leaves. Back on board now with Steve Cameron.
The standing start is unique in itself, but an added dimension here at Laguna. If you look here, the start-finish straight is on a slight incline, so it's an added problem for the drivers. Typically, they're trying not to jump the start and move forward from their grid position itself, but here you can actually roll back. So they're really dancing their feet on the pedals. They've got to work all 3 pedals at once, and obviously they only have 2 feet, so it's going to be a busy time for these guys when they're waiting for that green light.
Peter Fawcetta pulls into place. Cars at front are set on a 21-foot stagger from first to second, but at the back of the field it's just an 18-foot stagger, and you can see how tight it is at the very back of the field. They didn't want anyone to be starting back around turn 11. Now they await the red light, then the green. The flag waves from the rear. Up come the revs, drop the clutch, and away we'll go.
Good start by Neerberg once again. Chris Smith in the second row looked a little bit close, and there's an accident back in the pack. That looked like number 18, I believe. That may have been Rodriguez, I think it is. And Steve O'Hara, I believe that's involved. Well, this could necessitate a red flag here. There's a lot of damage to the cars there, and you see Cameron in busy traffic there.
The front stretch is
Jamie
blocked.
Gallus is spun.
Jamie Gallus.
John Miranda. Everyone's off the track.
It's an all skate here in the first corner, and we had damage, severe damage to 2 cars on the start-finish straightaway. Right now, I don't see yellow flags at the corners nearest our announce position. Here's another look at the start. Watch at the rear of your field as they attempt to go about 5 wide, and contact is made right there.
Someone got a really slow getaway, and unfortunately someone tried to go around the outside of that guy, got clipped, came back across in front of Steve O'Hara.
And we have a red flag. The field will be brought around and stopped. Now here's a look at what happened down in the first corner. A lot of tire smoke. You see someone riding way up onto the berm on the outside of the racetrack.
And there you see Jamie Gallus on the inside, loop it around. I don't know whether he was touched, and John Miranda looked as though he just spun in, you know, obviously getting on the brakes a bit harder, seeing Jamie.
Watch the back of the field on this replay. The car with the yellow front wings goes all the way across the track, bumps the white car of Jeff Rodriguez, who rebounds into the white machine of Steve O'Hara, who spins and backs hard into the pit wall, trapping Tony Stefanelli in the process. Meanwhile, that car with the yellow front wings that sparked it all, John Miranda, who got away cleanly until he spun down in turn 2. And so after 13 standing starts in 1992, the 14th and final one of the year produces a red flag. And now officials are telling us we have just witnessed the final standing start of the season. The field will be brought around to a stop. The track will be cleaned up, and then we will use a rolling restart to get things back underway here at Laguna Seca. We'll be back in just a moment with more from the final event of the Toyota Atlantic Championship. Welcome back to Laguna Seca, where the field is behind the safety car after that big collision at the green light involving Steve O'Hara from Laguna Hills, California, Tony Stefanelli from Belvedere, Illinois, and Jeff Rodriguez from Pasadena, Texas. Now the light bar has been extinguished on the safety car. We will not do another standing start. Officials have ruled that this lap behind the safety car will count against the 28-lap total in this race, and they will start single file rolling.
And Charles Neerberg trying to get a jump there on the start, pulled out 2 car lengths already on Russell Spencer. Russell locked the brakes up under braking there for turn 11, and they should be getting the green flag now.
Well, we've seen how they standing start. Now let's see how they handle the rolling start. Russell Spence right up on the gearbox of Charles Neerberg, and he'll pass on the outside down into 1.
And he should make this move stick. He does. Charles must have made a mistake there coming off 11, because Russell was way behind coming through there, and we see Chris Smith there into the 3rd position, and Empringham's in the 5th place, Stuart Crow in 4th. Look on board there from Steve Cameron. He's in the 6th position right now behind David Empringham, the Pert Plus car in front of him.
Steve Cameron is right there. He is behind Chris Smith. Look for that bright yellow Dayglow colored 07 car. Right there to the left of your screen, Chris Smith. Behind him, the number 3 in blue and white is Stuart Crow. We've got a looper. And a reloop. 55 is Lars Dirks from Tempe, Arizona, series rookie.
You see David Empingham pretty close to Stuart Crow there. Lost a little bit of ground right through the middle of the turn and should not be in a position to make a pass up into the corkscrew here. But the man who has to make a move is Steve Cameron, currently in the 6th position. He has to overhaul some of these guys and somehow get in front of Chris Smith before this race is over.
Down the corkscrew they plunge, the height of a 16-story building, rocketing downhill before they drop a gear and dash through the right-hander, turn 10. Interestingly, all 3 of our top contenders for the title are in different chassis. A Ralt for Stuart Crow, a Swift for Chris Smith, and this man Steve Cameron in a Reynard chassis. It's been a great battle all year long between those 3 chassis.
Empingham looks to the inside, locked to left front brake there, or left front tire, should I say, under braking. He's going to be careful. It's very hard here. He wants to have a good position in this race, but he doesn't want to take out a title contender. That's the last thing he wants to do. If he makes a move, he wants it to be a clean pass. On board again with Steve Cameron there, heading through turn 4. See the bunch up in front of him. David Empingham dropped a wheel there on the exit of the turn. See him coming down, should be a 3rd gear through this turn. Back on the power hard. Up to 4th gear for turn 6.
Meanwhile, Stuart Crow looking to the inside of the yellow car of Chris Smith, and right behind him, glued to his gearbox, David Empingham.
Empingham's closer this time. He's going to be looking for the inside down into the corkscrew here. Stuart locked a rear brake under braking, and that's going to happen here. There's a slight difference in level of pavement there, and you're going to see the right rear lock and then the left front as they come into that turn if they're late on the brakes.
Empingham puts a wheel off and raises some dust. And we have a car off on the hill between turn 6 and 7. A smoky exit, it would appear, for Danny Olmstead from Tracy, California. No sign of heavy contact, but he's done.
We see Chris Smith now heading up the front straightaway. Things have spread out a little bit right now. Up front, we see Russell Spence down into turn 2. He has a bit of a lead over Charles Neerberg, but this is the real battle for the championship.
Smith in yellow, Crow in blue and white. Now let's take a moment to check out what just happened to Danny Olmstead. Watch for the big puff of smoke from the car of Greg Ray just ahead. Kind of blinds Olmstead. Both cars take to the dirt. The rear end starts to come around, and Olmstead can't quite get it back under control.
A rookie to the series, in fact his first open wheel race. Started racing at 9 years old, now 20, a veteran of midgets on dirt. And this guy was really looking forward to the race this weekend. Had a problem in yesterday's race, got taken out late in the going, and very disappointing there. He's looking forward to getting some miles under his belt today.
From Tracy, California, Danny Olmstead, one of the debutants in the series today. Now there is Russell Spence.
Russell's looking pretty smooth. Blew an engine in the race yesterday and had to borrow an engine from Jordan Harris, one of the Wilbur Bunce racing entries. The guys knew that these guys have really worked hard this season. Disappointing that Russell was put out of the championship contention, but he wants to score a victory for Reynard and for his 3001 team here today.
Carlos Bonetti is the leader for the Rookie of the Year. Actually, both Russell Spence and his teammate Harold Heisman are higher in rookie points, but because they are so vastly experienced in these sorts of cars running in Europe, Spence and Heisman have decided they will decline the honor, and thus Carlos Bonetti is right on top of the rookie points. The yellow car is Smith. The blue and white car is Crow. Then David Empingham. Then Steve Cameron. Chris Smith is doing just what he needs to do, stay ahead of his opponents. He doesn't have to win the race.
He said the thing that scares him most, not that it's happened a lot this year, but he doesn't want a mechanical DNF. He just wants a good, clean race.
This is the best battle on the racetrack. Chris Smith back to Stuart Crow, and we'll be back with more from Laguna Seca. Rocketing uphill towards the corkscrew turn at Laguna Seca. Chris Smith in position to clinch the Toyota Atlantic Championship. And there's a spin. Number 3 title contender Stuart Crow has tangled with David Empingham.
David Empingham, I believe, nudged Stuart there under braking and turned him around. No damage to Stuart's car, I don't believe, but David's lost his front wings and nose. He's going to have to pit. But for Stuart Crow, this is a disaster. Puts him further back in the field when he needed to gain points on Chris Smith, not lose them today.
If Stuart Crow were to have any shot at the title, he has to finish in the top 3 today. Now, here's another look up at the top of the corkscrew.
See Neerberg go through, Chris Smith coming through the turn right now, and we're looking for Stuart Crow. Starts to turn in, and Empringham is right underneath him. I have to believe that David Empringham helped Stuart Crow around there.
There's Mark Dismore trailing Steve Cameron. What a terrific drive for Mark Dismore yesterday in the #1 car that carried Jovi Marcello to last year's championship. It's the car that Jovi Marcello started in the first race of the year at Miami, and Cameron has his hand in the air as though to direct Dismore past.
I don't know what that was all about. Obviously, Steve, there may have been a yellow there for the stranded car, and he put his hand in the air, but it's very unlikely he's going to be waving Mark Dismore by at this stage of the race.
I can't imagine why he would wave him by. I wonder if he was angry at him for something. Now Cameron makes the hard left at the head of the start-finish straightaway with Dismore just behind him, and just behind them the 23 of John Marconi, who also had a terrific drive here yesterday.
Strong third-place finish yesterday. Ran heads up with John at Watkins Glen earlier this year, I did, and he's a real strong racer, doesn't give an inch, and he's now like going to move in on Mark Dismore. These two guys, Cameron and Dismore, got slightly held up there, and Marconi's closed in on them.
Mark Dismore has appeared in the series only 3 times this year, at Phoenix, where he was 4th, at Long Beach, where he was 1st. There's David Empringham now in the pits to replace that nose, banged up in the contact with Crow.
As we suggested, it was a hopeless cause for David there. First mistake I've seen him make all year. Unfortunate there. I think he's been the find of the 92 season, and I'm sure he was looking for another strong run today.
2 victories for David Empringham this year, 1 at Toronto, 1 at Mossport. There's your race leader.
There we saw the reason for Cameron putting his hand in the air. There's a waving yellow flag coming up into the corkscrew, and that would have been his indication to Mark Dismore behind that they're under a yellow situation. Do not overtake.
Russell Spence, who led the series after winning 2 of the first 3 races at Miami and Long Beach, absolutely astonished the series with his speed, particularly on the oval at Phoenix.
Pace cars on the track. Joe Sposato there has waved by. Remember, Joe had to pit on the pace lap there and is working his way back through the field. So the pace car is now looking for the leader, trying to pick Russell Spence up.
Let me correct Russell Spence. He won the first 2 races at Miami and Phoenix, did not finish at Long Beach with mechanical problems. We have reason for a full course caution. Here comes your leader, Russell Spence, in the red and white Reynard Toyota. We'll take a quick timeout and return for more of the drama of the final round of the Toyota Atlantic Championship from Laguna Seca. Back at Laguna Seca, once again, the lights are off on the safety car, meaning we will get the green flag next time around. At the head of the field, there is Russell Spence. Out of the championship at this point, but he has a big role to play in who wins this race. Right now, if the race were to end at this point, Chris Smith would have 150 points to 141 for Steve Cameron and 124 for Stuart Crow. There is Chris Smith. He runs 3rd behind Spence, Charles Neerberg. In 4th is Steve Cameron. 5th is Mark Dismore, followed by John Marconi, Harold Heisman, Bert Hart, Leo Parente in his first race in the Toyota Atlantic Championship in quite a while. And in 10th place, the 3rd of our 3 title contenders, Stuart Crow.
This could be a big break for Russell Spence. I spoke to him after yesterday's race. He had a severe crash at Vancouver earlier this year and broke some ribs, and he felt one pop yesterday. So this brief yellow period could have given him a rest right now. And this is now or never for Cameron. He really has to get around Chris Smith at this stage of the race.
And he is right behind him. The yellow car, Smith, and Steve Cameron. Smith draws away just a little bit as they come off turn 11 and flash across the start-finish line.
Looks like he has a little bit more straight line speed there down into turn 2. Cameron is not close enough to make a move. We saw Marconi and Dismore really fighting for that 4th and 5th position. Exiting turn 2 there, looks pretty clean so far. The fields goes through. We're back on board with Cameron there. And Chris Smith went inside someone. Russell Spence.
Russell Spence for the 2nd day in a row. Russell is having mechanical problems, it would appear.
That's hard to believe. What a disaster for Russell Spence. The team were really looking forward to finishing the season on a high note. Very disappointed to see the championship end yesterday, but we're really optimistic about pulling off a victory with Russell starting on the front row. That's just too bad.
Amazing when you consider that one of the engineers for this team is the man who designed the car, Adrian Reynard. Mike Earl, a vastly experienced Formula 3000 team manager, has the other car. Now there is Charles Neerberg in the new Ralt chassis. He was the pole sitter yesterday, suffered the heartbreak when that $1 throttle linkage park left him just wandering around the racetrack, turning the race over to Mark Dismore. But here comes the battle. Oh, Steve Cameron got tapped from behind by Mark Dismore, I think, and nearly lost it.
Look at the battle here for second. I think Cameron actually just got a little bit loose coming out of turn 9 there, and Mark Dismore tried to go around the outside, but that's not the spot to make the overtaking maneuver. And we see Harold Heisman. He's displaced John Marconi, but Hart follows closely.
These are all for position, nose to tail, following the restart. Charles Neerberg is up and gone. Now here comes Dismore in the white car on the left. Tried the outside of Steve Cameron, but it won't work.
Cameron must be running a lot of downforce in his car, because he really does not seem to have the straightaway speed that either Chris Smith or Mark Dismore has down the straightaway.
Jamie Gallus out of his car. He was running just outside the top 10, in 12th, in fact, as they restarted. But he, too, has suffered some sort of gremlins.
I'm not sure where that position was. Mark Dismore goes down the inside. No, again, Cameron closed the door there, and it really plays on the mind of a driver. I've been in this position before where you have a championship going on. He wants to get up front. Mark Dismore has the chance to equal the record amount of victories in Toyota Atlantic Championship history today with his 13th victory. He'll tie the late Gilles Villeneuve, but he doesn't want to have an effect on this championship. He has to make a clean pass.
Russell Spence is in the pits. Here's Ralph.
This one started off looking more like it did the beginning of the year for you, the dominant machine. What happened? Did you have any idea it was letting go?
No. What happened actually was the gear shift broke. Actually it came undone, the gear lever itself. So we made a good start. My Virgin Records steady system, Reynard, has been excellent all weekend. Unfortunately, the engine today and yesterday and the gear handle today. So I got down the first corner, selected second, and then it wouldn't come out.
That's how it goes, and so with a smile, Russell Spence shrugs off a championship gone astray here at Laguna. Diving down into turn 1 from over 135 miles an hour, blue tire smoke from somebody. Chris Smith in yellow, followed by Steve Cameron.
We see Mark Dismore there in the picture. I believe that Mark is probably a little bit quicker than these guys. We saw him have a nice victory yesterday, and he's obviously got a good setup for this track. Bill Fickling was very keen to have the questions answered about whether the Swift is still competitive against the new Ralt chassis and the new Reynard, and Mark Dismore yesterday certainly put that question to rest.
The Swift is an American-built chassis. The Ralt and the Reynard come from England, and all three have been mixing it up since the new Ralt appeared early in the season. We'll be back with more from Laguna. In 1990, the Toyota Atlantic Series returned to Laguna Seca after a short hiatus and established the traditional year-ending doubleheader. In 1990, the weekend pairing was a triumph for Mark Dismore, his 6th and 7th victories of the season, en route to the Toyota Atlantic Championship Western Division. 2 years down the road, the very similar-looking white Swift of Mark Dismore is looking for another Laguna sweep. He won yesterday's event, and now he challenges Steve Cameron. Here's Cameron's view under hard braking for turn 2. Give the position to Dismore. A remarkably easy pass, considering Cameron's running for the title.
I'm very surprised that Steve Cameron wasn't more defensive in his line there. Obviously got a poor exit off turn 11, but allowed Mark Dismore just to drive alongside him. I mean, the championship's on the line today, and you've got to drive flat out and make everything stick. It's very surprising that he's letting another guy get between he and Chris Smith.
I thought you were going to describe the necessary driving style another way. Steve Cameron, by losing that place, loses another point to Chris Smith, and he cannot afford it. To reiterate, Chris Smith needs only to finish in the top 3 positions to clinch automatically. After that, it becomes a cat-and-mouse game with Steve Cameron and to some degree with Stuart Crowe. But after that collision with David Empringham, Crowe is way back in the field. There goes Charles Neerberg, and there was the gap back to the second place car of Smith. Now we're on board with Peter Fawcetta Jr. Teammates with Gustavo Gutierrez Jr. in Team Junior, as it's known around the pit lane.
Peter's doing a real good job here today, trying to catch up with Frank Allers, and I believe it's John Miranda right behind him. Peter's on the comeback track, had a severe accident last year at Phoenix, crushed his left heel, and in fact he has to go back to the surgeon after this race is over, have his left heel re-broken and set into place because he's in a lot of pain right now. So it's not a lucky break for Peter Fossetta there. He needs to go and have that fixed.
Fossetta's car prepared by Stuart Moore Racing, who took Floridian Steve Shelton to the title back in 1988. Listen for the big downshifts.
Coming down into turn 2 there. Looks like he got a bit of a problem getting the car turned in there. It's kind of an excessive wheel, steering wheel input there as he went through turn 2. Accelerating up to third gear.
Meanwhile, Chris Smith in yellow has Mark Dismore behind him, and Dismore makes a clean pass. Smith is not taking any chances.
No, Chris was not going to fight that position at all. He's in the perfect position to win this championship today. He's not concerned about the victory. He just wants to bring it home and win the championship.
So that knocks Smith down another notch into third place. Dismore, having won yesterday on the march, looking for Charles Neerberg, trying to make it a weekend sweep. Just like he did back in 1990 to take the title.
Dismore won yesterday, but Charles Neerberg looked pretty much in control of the race. He's had the fastest car all weekend, sat on the pole for 2 races, led the race until he broke yesterday, and it'll be interesting to see if Mark Dismore can do anything about the gap between he and the leader.
Today's race caps off a remarkable season for Toyota. While the battle simmers, let's take a moment to reflect on one of the most successful and diverse seasons undertaken by any manufacturer. For Toyota, the 1992 racing season could only be described as a dream come true. Their success in the IMSA Camel GT Series was truly remarkable. By winning 9 of their 13 races, including the last 7 in a row, Toyota not only captured the Manufacturers' Championship, but saw their lead driver, Juan Fangio II, emerge with the driver's title as well. Their efforts in off-road and stadium racing were similarly rewarded. Rod Millen and Ivan Stewart led the Mickey Thompson Off-Road Series, bringing Toyota its 9th Manufacturers' Championship in 10 years. And of course, every race winner in the Toyota Atlantic Championship has been powered by the reliable 4-cylinder multi-valve Toyota engine. Truly accomplishments that make Toyota very proud.
Well, I think there's technology, Toyota technology, evident in all the aspects of motorsports we're involved in the United States, from the open-wheel cars to the Toyota Atlantics to the off-road trucks and the Mickey Thompson and Score off-road series, and also in the IMSA GTP arena. Toyota technology has proven itself to be far and away the class of the field.
Well, here's a guy who's been on a fast track on both sides of the border this year, from Ontario, David Empringham. This is his 8th appearance in the Toyota Atlantic Championship this year, most of them in Canada, as he went for that Players Limited Atlantic Series title. He was a part of yesterday's race, strong second-place finish, and he's driving well again today. He's a guy we're going to have to watch next year. Meanwhile, up on the point, there is Charles Neerberg.
Looking pretty smooth there coming through the infield section. This is a new part of the Laguna Seca Raceway. If you remember, it turned a fast corner off through turn 2, and they expanded the track's length, added this new loop in there, and that's where they're just coming. They're returning to where the old circuit was, coming up to the new turn 6.
There's the gap back to Chris Smith with Steve Cameron just behind him. Now there's Harold Heisman, and just behind him, John Marconi having a great battle. What a year.
Battle for 5th there, and we see Stuart Crow back in the picture, so he's now sitting in the 8th position and looking for a way around Leo Pereni, who's right in front of him. Great run by Pereni here. He's been a veteran of the Barbasad Pro Series for the last couple of years, finished 8th in the series, had a few problems this year, had a victory last year, I believe it was at Elkhart Lake, but he's run very successfully in that series for the past 2 seasons.
And those are turbocharged cars, 2-liter turbos. These are 1.6-liter normally aspirated Toyota 4-cylinder power plants, about 240 horsepower. Right now, Leo Pereni's have to using all of it to stay ahead of Stuart Crow. We'll be back with more from Laguna Seca. The 1991 Toyota Atlantic Championship doubleheader at Laguna Seca was a 2-man battle. It went down to Sunday for the championship. Jim Vasser against Joby Marcello. Vasser needed to score every point possible and led the race, while Marcello was the hunter, staying close to Vasser. In the end, Jimmy Vasser locked up the victory, but Joby Marcello got the top 5 finish he needed to clinch the first unified Toyota Atlantic Championship title since 1984. The spirit of the late Joby Marcello is still very much with the Toyota Atlantic Championship. That white number 1 trailing Charles Neerberg is being driven by Mark Dismore, who drove for the same team as Joby Marcello. And that number 1 was on the car when Marcello drove it at the season opening event in Miami in the 1992 Toyota Atlantic Championship. Before this race, another car from P1 Racing was painted up in the colors that Joby carried last year. It was taken on a ceremonial lap of honor by Bill Fickling, who runs P1 Racing. And Joby Marcello's name is on the annual sportsmanship trophy to be given out in the award ceremonies following today's race. Right now, Mark Dismore giving that number 1 a ride, closing up once again on Charles Neerberg.
99 is John Brooks, and he's lost the right rear corner of that car. He needs to slow down, otherwise he's going to hit something real hard. Look at that, the right rear corner is completely torn off. He must have tangled with someone. And there it is.
Picked a fine time to leave me, loose wheel. John Brooks almost won on the oval at Phoenix, Arizona in the second race of the year. A funny thing happened. They let the race go on 1 lap too long. And so on the countback rule, Russell Spence was declared the winner of that race. Close moment for John Brooks.
It'll be interesting to see what happens here. They now got some traffic. Charles, that's Gary Peterson, number 27. Charles locks the brakes up there. Mark Dismore's going to get a cleaner exit coming off here. Let's see what happens. Very difficult, though, to get in position for a pass with these sweeping turns down out of the corkscrew. Oh, geez.
3 wide.
Wow. That's wild stuff there. Mark Dismore was on the outside, and Charles just went for it. And Mark going to go to the inside. This is great racing. This really is great racing. You see Charles Neerberg closing the door. He's done a great job here today.
Calvin, I know you told me it's really hard to flat spot one of these tires, but Charles Neerberg has given it a heck of a shot. Mark Dismore all over Neerberg. Let's get down to Ralph in Dismore's pit.
Bill, Mark is running what seems to be an incredibly torrid pace again. Is this a Dismore of all back again?
Mark. I think he's fully recovered from his injuries, and I think we're fine. If he gets by Charles here, he's going to pull away because we're being held up about a half a second a lap right now.
Does he have enough car left, or is this going to come down to his driver's skill?
Plenty of car. I'm sure he wants to pressure Charles as long as he can. I hope that he makes a mistake. If he doesn't, I'm sure he'll try a move here pretty soon. We only got, what, 5 laps to go now, so.
Well, there you have it from Mark Dismore's car owner. He feels Dismore is being held up by pole sitter and race leader Charles Neerberg as they rocket through turn 5 and uphill towards 6. Meanwhile, behind them, this is the battle for the championship. Steve Cameron with Chris Smith just ahead. Cameron's going to try Smith in turn 11. He gets a little squirrely. Off the corner, checks his mirrors to look for Smith, but Cameron has 3rd place cleanly.
He's going to need more than that. That's a good start in the proceedings. 7 points split of these two guys going into today's race, and that will be a 2 points back in Steve Cameron's favor, but it's still a 5-point differential. He needs someone to help him out here. Someone has to catch Chris Smith and demote him a couple of places back.
There's not much time left. Unofficially 4 laps to go. And Steve Cameron begins to draw away. His mom back in New Zealand, should she see these pictures, will be very proud of the job Steve is doing.
I really feel that Steve has struggled a little bit this weekend with the setup of the car. They don't seem to have the pace that the other guys have. I think Chris Smith potentially has something left in the bag, and he's just driving for the championship. Steve Cameron's driving flat out to try and do whatever he can.
Well, no matter what happens, it's been a great season for Steve Cameron. He won the 24 Hours of Daytona in IMSA's Camel Lights class, driving an Acura Spice with Parker Johnstone, Dan Marvin, and Jimmy Vasser, another graduate of the Toyota Atlantic Championship.
Once again, Charles Neerberg locks that left rear corner as he goes into the braking for turn 11. Mark Dismore is really staying on him.
Well, we'll see if we run out of laps before Charles runs out of rubber. Dismore down the outside. He's tried this before, and this time Neerberg spins.
Wow. Keep the engine running, Charles. I think he's stuck in the gravel right there. That's too bad. That really is too bad. It was a great drive by Charles yesterday, and he really wanted to bring it home today. I don't think he's going to get out of that situation without a tow. And here we see Mark Dismore on his way to potentially a record-tying 13th victory in Atlantic Championship history. Let's watch it again. They're coming down into turn 2. Heavy brake in there. And remember, all the time, Mark Dismore's putting pressure on. He locks the left front tire, Charles does, and just loops it around and gets stuck in the gravel. And I don't believe he kept the engine running at all there.
There the car sits. In it sits 41-year-old Charles Neerberg. What a tough break.
That's got to be frustrating. I spoke to Charles after yesterday's race, and he was very frustrated by that situation. We're back on board with Steve Cameron now as he climbs the hill up towards the corkscrew. This puts Steve into the second place position. Now, something could happen here. If anything happened to Dismore, there's a bigger point spread between first and second. That's 4 points. Chris Smith drops any further back, he's got to watch out.
20 points for victory, 16 for second, 14 for third, 12 for fourth, 11 for fifth, dropping 1 point all the way back to 15th. You're right, Chris Smith cannot afford to lose any more ground on Steve Cameron. Back on board now with Peter Fawcetta Jr. through the infield here at Laguna. Everybody with something to prove in this race, the final event of the 1992 Toyota Atlantic Championship. Up front, Mark Dismore leads, but the battle for the title goes on just behind him, and we'll be back with more from Laguna Seca. Stay with us. At Laguna Seca as 35-year-old Mark Dismore brings the P1 Racing Swift down the hill just like he did back in 1990 when he won the Toyota Atlantic Championship. Mark Dismore is on his way to a 2-race sweep of the Laguna Seca weekend.
Good clean exit there out of turn 11, coming under the bridge. He heads down into turn 2. See the stranded car there of Charles Neerberg stuck in the gravel pit. Charles has got out of the car, obviously couldn't get it out of the sand. His day's done, but we watch Mark Dismore looking as if he's on his way to victory.
Mark Dismore on his way to a full recovery from his accident at that Indianapolis. Now there is the number 20,
Joe Sposato. Been an eventful day for Joe. Started the race in the pits and obviously spun there. I believe that's turn 6. In fact, coming out of turn 5, he's looped it and he's stuck in the sand, and it's very hard to get out of there. Once those wheels start spinning, you need some help.
And the leader, Mark Dismore, comes flying through the dust and climbs the hill one more time. Beautiful view of this part of Northern California. One of America's greatest novelists, John Steinbeck, wrote so much about the Monterey Peninsula in stories like Cannery Row, East of Eden. Great part of the country, a great racetrack, and nobody has handled it any better this weekend than this man, Mark Dismore. He will win the race, but it would appear that the championship belongs to Chris Smith.
Hand in the air for Mark Dismore. A great victory, 2 in a row here at Laguna. His 3rd of the season, ties their all-time wins for the season. 3 apiece to Mark Dismore, 3 for this man Chris Smith, 3 for Russell Spence, but Chris Smith is going to clinch the championship if he can just make it to the line.
From Palos Verdes Estates, California, son of engineer Carroll Smith, who works on his son's team. Not a terribly high buck affair, but they have spent their money wisely, and they take the 1992 Toyota Atlantic Championship. There is one happy young man.
A lot of maturity shown by Chris Smith there today. He really drove a heads-up race, knew what he had to do, did a good job yesterday, kept the other title contenders behind him, and he knew that he could let Cameron by.
And there is Steve Cameron pulling alongside. John Marconi comes up to make it a threesome. And a wave between competitors for a battle well fought. Steve Cameron will finish in 2nd place in the 1992 standings, and Stuart Crow 3rd. We'll be back to meet our winner and talk with our new champion when we return to Laguna Seca Raceway in Monterey, California.
You're watching ESPN, the Total Sports Network.
ESPN Speed World coverage of the Toyota Atlantic Championship from Laguna Seca, California, has been brought to you by Toyota Motorsports, where technology on a fast track is built into every Toyota. And by Valvoline. People who know use Valvoline. Welcome back to another beautiful racing afternoon at Laguna Seca Raceway in California. Here's a look at our top 15 finishers in this final round of the Toyota Atlantic Championship. Mark Dismore picks up his third victory in 4 starts this year. Steve Cameron finishes runner-up in the race and in the championship. Chris Smith, with a third-place finish, locks up his first Toyota Atlantic Championship. In 4th place was John Marconi. In 5th, Colin Truman from Ohio, up from 12th place. Stuart Crow, who had that collision with David Empringham, dropped well back. He finishes 6th, followed by Leo Parente, Harold Heisman, Empringham, and Robin Buck. Frank Allers leads 11th through 15th. Now let's get down to Victory Lane, where Ralph Shaheen is standing by with our new champion.
Well, here he is, the 1992 Toyota Atlantic champion, Chris Smith. It's been a hard year and a tough battle, but you did what you had to do. Sometimes that can be difficult for a driver to have to just place in a position and not actually race. Is that what you did today?
Absolutely. At the start, I could tell we had a lot of speed. My crew, they worked so hard last night to get the car right, and it was perfect. But it was better for me to drive it at 9/10 and win the championship than to try to race with the guys up front. And I'm just so damn glad it's over.
You're actually visibly shaking here right now. How much does this mean to you and the possibilities of what your career holds from here?
Well, I've been in racing for a long time, and it's nice to finally get something really substantial out of it. I owe so much to our sponsors, Earls, to my dad, to Bertles Racing Engines, Arbco Wheels, everyone that's helped us get here, and I'm just glad that it finally paid off.
It's been a tremendous championship season so far through the 1992 year, and Chris Smith is the Toyota Atlantic champion.
All right, thank you, Ralph. Here's a look at the final championship standings. Chris Smith picks up his first Toyota Atlantic Championship by 5 points over Steve Cameron, and Stuart Crow comes home third. Now let's get back down to Victory Lane to hear from our race winner, Mark Dismore, with Ralph Shaheen.
Well, Mark, you told me before the start of this thing you were going to have to drive your heart out to get around those guys. Would this rank as one of your best drives ever, do you think?
How could I say no? Yeah, definitely. I want to dedicate my wins to Jovi Marcello and his dad, Eddie. I mean, Jovi was a hell of a competitor, a real quiet kid, and a fantastic person. And I want to dedicate my wins to Jovi.
It's a special tribute to Jovi Marcello, a gentleman who was a good friend of yours, but it also is special in the fact that you're back, aren't you?
Yeah, you can say that. Yeah.
Mark Dismore is definitely back, Bob Barcher.
All right, thank you, Ralph. Congratulations to Mark Dismore and to Chris Smith. It's been a great season, and we hope you'll join us next year when it all begins again, the Toyota Atlantic Championship here on ESPN. I'm Bob Barsha for Calvin Fish and Ralph Shaheen. Thanks for being with us. So long from Laguna Seca Raceway in Monterey, California.